Pete, welcome back to Two Sides of the Table. It has been a little while since we've been in the studio.
Oh, it's always great to be back in the studio, and especially when we're talking about our season that we've got around bringing experts to the table. And I'm really excited to be doing this. But you've had some interesting things happening in your world, like a lot of events in your world, and I hear you also took a break recently.
I did. We have been busy doing a lot of things like you. We've been out and about at Evolve and all of the local events. And last week I had a quick break with the family. I took them over to Fiji and I thought we would do it during the non-school holidays because it can get a bit mad during school holidays. And I thought, well, I've still got a little one who's able to be pulled out of daycare whenever I feel like it. Why not take advantage? But how about you, Pete? What have you been up to?
Yeah, so travelling around, and we actually did our first Evolve role-based groups a couple of weeks ago in Brisbane. So, traditionally we've focused actually on the founders there, but it was great to be involved in some of the service leadership groups and sales leadership groups as well. And, like you, I'm actually prepping up for the Easter school holidays. Apparently school frowns upon it when you take your kids out of school when it's not school holidays. So we will be up at Caloundra just chilling out, actually, which will be
Very
great.
nice. Yeah, we're about to do our first role base in May down in Melbourne for Evolve. So I'm looking forward to that and seeing how it might be a little bit different. But we are in season 3, as we know, and this is our expert series. And today we are joined by Jason Maricchiolo. He's the founder of ISO 365, very well known around our community, which is great. And which is actually Australia's, I was doing some research this morning, you guys are actually Australia's most certified ISO compliance partner, which is something pretty cool to be proud of. So Jason has spent years working inside the IT and security industries before starting ISO 365. He's got a team of consultants which help businesses become ISO certified and founded the business in 2023. So you're quite a new business, which is pretty exciting for you. And so you help businesses sort of embed ISO management directly inside Microsoft 365 and virtual compliance and things like that. I'm sure you'll tell us a little bit more about it. But Jason, welcome to Two Sides of the Table. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kayla, and thanks, Peter. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So talk to us a bit about your story and your background. I obviously gave a little bit of a background, but I'm sure it's always better to hear it from the horse's mouth than from me. So talk to us about your story.
Thank you. No, you hit the nail on the head. It's an awesome intro. You obviously did your research, which is great. But my background is 15 years or so in managed services. Pretty common story, I suppose, with people making that jump from being within managed services and then helping MSPs on the other side. Or on the other side of the table, like we are here. Effectively a couple of years ago, or almost 3 years ago now, started ISO 365. My sole intent was to just go out and help as many MSPs that needed assistance in this space. And quite quickly, I realised that it was a lot more than I had anticipated. So we were fortunate enough to be able to grow the team. We've got it's a team of 14 now, actually.
Wow.
So we've managed to grow a fair bit, and just doing some great things with MSPs and helping them and their clients as well.
Yeah, and so are MSPs and IT service providers your core business? Do you help other businesses, or is that really your sole?
Yeah, so we set out to help this industry in particular, but now we are via MSPs engaging with their clients and enabling them to provide those services. So it's kind of evolved in its own way to be able to be almost an ISO compliance in a box for some MSPs to be able to go. Once their client base might turn around and say, hey, we need some help in this space, can you help us? We want them to say, yes, we can.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be powered by us, but, obviously there's a relationship there.
Yeah, amazing. And we share some customers, and I've heard such good things about how easy you make it for them to become ISO compliant. And obviously you're talking about it being ISO in a box, I suppose, for their customers. What is it that you're seeing is the sort of how do you do that? Like, how do you make it so easy? Because I've heard, I worked in a business before, entering into this world, and it was so like there was so many auditors involved and there was so much paperwork and the whole business had to be prepped before the auditor come in to make sure that, we didn't do anything wrong while the auditor was here.
Yeah.
How do you make it
Stop, don't make
yeah,
any change.
exactly. How do you make it so easy for them?
Yeah, well, I suppose we did set out to make it easy, but we've learned pretty quickly not to make it too easy because then you need buy-in in the process, and so we learned very quickly that it's not about making it super easy for everybody, but just helping them navigate. Almost like having a someone that's going to help them get through. The process I say the easiest way, but just a more structured way. Like when we know where we're going, it's a lot easier to follow the map, if you will. So usually this does, or projects like this can derail internally when, you've just got this big ISO standard in front of you and you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I need to focus on first and second and then third? But whereas with us, we at least know where we need to spend most of the energy. And I suppose that might be where that ease comes from. Just knowing, what direction we're heading to. I kind of liken it sometimes to, dropping into a forest without knowing where you are. And if you're on your own, it could take you days, months, sometimes even a year to get out if you can survive that long. But if you've got a tour guide that knows the way out, it's always going to be a bit more streamlined and a bit quicker.
Yeah, what a great analogy about having that compass and helping guide somebody actually on that journey. Because having been through ISO in a number of different organisations, it is a journey. It's not a destination. It's not just you tick the box and you're done. You need to then continually work on that. And I think it's interesting if we step back, because when we look to put this season together, season 3, we really wanted to get experts to the table. But I'd like to maybe just dig a little bit into your story as well, because I think the ISO 365 is an amazing entrepreneurial story. A business that started almost 3 years ago. You were one of the fastest growing businesses in Australia on the AFR Fast Starters, yeah. And I think many of our audience are trying to grow their business. What do you put that secret down to? Obviously, doing a great job from an ISO perspective, but I'd love maybe just to get some insights to share with the audience, because everyone's wanting to grow just as fast as you are.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that as well. It's been a pretty wild ride for us. All I can say is that we've really invested heavily in our people, right? So, obviously in this whole world of AI and everyone, trying to create efficiencies and all of that, obviously you do use these tools where you need to, but fundamentally we remain a people-first business. We are a remote-first business as well, so all of our staff do work from home and we're able to provide a really good service from there. But effectively, what I set out to do to build this business was I knew, which vertical I needed to talk to first and foremost, and I really just did hone in on that. So joining things like the Evolve community and other communities as well really helped launch where we are today. And then obviously word of mouth, you do a good job, Pete, in this world, and you generally are rewarded. And I always say to the team as well that we're only as good as our first negative comment or feedback, and so we really try to stay on top of that, and always just trying to provide the best experience for our clients and our partners, and then just continue to provide value. Right, it's not just good enough to get them certified and then just disappear. The way that we work on a longer term engagement, and when we become virtual compliance officers. So we're watching what's happening in the world and just making sure that we're not just sitting on our hands.
Yeah, and I think, really bringing that expertise to the table, and I think there's a lot of things that people could learn from your story there. But I think sometimes it's good luck more than good management sometimes with business. And I think if you look at the current landscape across the MSP and TSP landscape, security posture is continuing to then be top of mind for everyone. And I think one of the things that people are looking to do is how do they then differentiate themselves in a very crowded market. So you've obviously been able to differentiate yourselves by picking one market and going really deep with that. But what I'm seeing is that a lot of people are going, well, there's a lot of other, everything from sort of the local fish and chip shop that's also got the IT shop attached to it, all the way through to large, ASX listed organisations. And there's large middle ground and people are trying to differentiate. Is that what you're seeing at the moment? Is that ISO has almost become a differentiation tool?
Yeah, it started out that way. Like 10 years ago, I could have easily had said that it was mainly only for your enterprise style businesses looking at that high end government work. That's a fair, that's a fair thing
Mm.
to say. But over time, buyers have become more savvy, and so instead of it just being government agencies asking for ISO certifications, it could be across InfoSec, or it even could be across quality. We've seen that for many, many years as well. But that's now just pushed down to your smaller agencies, and then you've got non-government style businesses that are also looking for ISO certification because they're looking for that certainty. So it has come from the top, but over the last few years, for sure, because buyers have become more savvy and need assurances, particularly in order to get their own insurance as well. It's just filtered down. So now we do see that those that are trying to stay ahead are starting to engage in ISO, whether it's with a partner or whether it's directly themselves. But it is starting to happen.
Yeah, wow. And so what's the process like for someone to go through? Like to Pete's point, we're sort of seeing little MSPs all the way through to enterprise, but like a lot of I think the people that maybe sit in the middle sort of see it as this like, tick and flick, it's just a pile of paperwork that I've got to do. But what's the actual process like, and why does sort of misunderstanding that cost them money?
Yeah. The process with us looks a little bit different to what's traditionally happened in the ISO space for many, many years.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of misconceptions out there that, it is this big beast that you just can't possibly
Yeah.
manage unless you're a, multi-million dollar business with your own embedded compliance team and all of that. That is true, but that is true if the business you're working for is at that scale. ISO compliance, at the crux of it all, it's a business management system, it's a risk management system, and for 27001, it's an information security management system with risk built in. And so, where the misconceptions come in is that traditionally companies have not been great at assessing their own risks, even if it's a small business. And we all have risk, even as micro businesses, everybody has risk. So, creating the policies and the registers and all of that, it's extremely important. But the most important part out of all of this is actually using that system, creating the evidence so that when auditors come in, they actually don't have to hound you about why haven't you followed your own processes. So it is more of if you do the right thing by your own system, I think the outcome is A, your certification, but also B, an easier to manage system.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that probably explains why it's now suddenly becoming part of the supply chain, where organisations are looking for each part of that supply chain, because you're only as good as the weakest link in that piece there. But when you look at ISO, like I traditionally think of 27001, it's sort of one of those ones that's bandied around all the time, and people automatically think security, but there's a lot of other audit standards out there that come under ISO, and you briefly touched on one was around quality management. Tell us a little bit about what that means, because I think I deliver a quality job, and I'm sure Kayla's business, delivers a quality job. But what does that standard really mean?
Yeah, so quality has been around for a lot longer than what the traditional InfoSec standards have been around for. Quality is think of it in the MSP space. Think of it as certifying almost that help desk life cycle. Okay, so we're not talking about the security of the business for quality. We're talking more about when a inquiry comes in from the sales process all the way through to that final invoice where you go, yep, job done, let's send that invoice for that project. That whole life cycle is audited. So you take any kind of system or ITSM or PSA tool that is largely looked at in a quality audit, because the good thing is for MSPs is that those kind of systems inherently adopt a lot of that 9001 quality management requirements. So things like traceability, that's where ticket numbers come in. Logging time, again, that's about traceability. But also then the most important part is around the customer feedback and what do we do with it. So you've got your tools like Smileback and some of those other tools that they generally are embedded into MSPs already. But if they're not actually pushing for for answers on those tickets, well, then they're not really getting much feedback, are they? So it's about trying to push those reaction rates up. What do we do if we get a negative or a neutral, and then how do we fix it ongoing? So that's where the corrective action side comes in.
And how long does that audit take though? Because like that sounds like, oh my goodness, if I, get an inquiry from a customer, it could take me 6 weeks to close them into a sale. We start the sale, we start the project, and that project could take 6 months. Like, is the auditor sort of looking at that for that one thing, or does the auditor sort of come in and go, oh, we'll look at the stuff that's in sales stage over here, and we'll look at the project stuff over here and sort of do it in like a week?
Yeah, no, so really great question. So auditing by nature is always a sampling process, right? So what will happen is an auditor will come in and they'll say, hey, we need to look at your quality process in this case. And it'll probably be something that occurred maybe 3 or 4 or 6 months ago.
Gotcha.
All right. Hopefully not 2 or 3 years ago. That'll generally get knocked back because businesses change in those times. But if we've got a recent record of a completed project, then that's a really good one to go back in time and go, okay, show us where they first engaged. How did we, provide a scope of work or a proposal? And then we just follow that bouncing ball all the way through to the end. And that will then, show a lot of what MSPs are doing in that quality space.
Gotcha. Makes sense. And so my information might be outdated here, but my understanding is the biggest ones are 9001, 14001, and 27001. Is that still the case, or is that a little bit outdated now?
Yeah, no, it's probably accurate. They're the three probably the most popular.
Yeah.
The newest one, I call them siblings now. So the
Yeah.
newest sibling to come through is the AI management system,
42,000.
42001, and that's got a very good uptick within our client base alone. But anyone that's looking to provide AI consulting services or do anything in that space and know how to commercially leverage, something like an ISO standard, which I'm a big fan of, by the way, that is starting to really, we're seeing a lot of those AI systems. And then more recently, the privacy standard, so 27701.
Okay.
It used to be a bolt-on to 27001 for anyone that's following closely, but now it's its own standalone system.
Okay.
And it's closely aligned to the GDPR and all of that kind of stuff. So protecting information, PII, all of that kind of stuff.
So say I want to go and get certified in 27001, 9001, 14001. I'm making that up, but is that 3 separate audits, or can they do it all at once?
Yeah, so if you build a integrated management system, then you can do a single audit across. Your audit will be longer because you'll still need to get in auditors that are competent in those standards to come in, because not every 27001 auditor can audit a environmental system, which would make a lot of sense, right? And conversely, the opposite's true too. But yes, you can build a single integrated management system across multiple standards. It can help streamline your audit, but it also can help streamline your management of that system itself, because all ISO standards share the same, I call it the front half. They're called the management clauses, and they all share a very common trait, which is all the clause numbers are the same. And so instead of referring to your system as an information security management system, you might just refer to it as an integrated management system and have that in your scope that you've got multiple ISO standards.
Yeah, wow.
No wonder you get experts involved.
Yeah, I know. There's too many numbers.
Look, having gone through this process for a listed business, the amount of complexity that was involved in that, and I have to admit, like when I was looking at sort of the market, I actually saw ISO as a differentiator when we started Digital Team, and I'll call out that ISO 365 actually helps us with all of our processes, and one of the things was it's not our domain expertise. Like we are great at solving that problem for organisations about finding the right skills at the right price. And it was a muscle that I really didn't want to build myself because I'm not an expert at it. And I think One of the things about why we're bringing experts to the table in this series is really for business owners to think they don't have to do it all themselves. They don't have to be across every single part of their business. They can lean on people with those domain expertise, whether that's marketing expertise, whether that's finance expertise, or whether that's around that certification and compliance piece that people like you offer. And I think one of the things that my understanding is that you've almost mapped it to be a managed service. So,
Yeah.
I remember when I was at MOQ, there was this big bill that would come around every year for all the audit and doing all of those things. And it always looked like a big chunk of change. And so I think you've disrupted the market a little bit, haven't you?
Yeah, we set out to do that, definitely, because in the traditional ISO space or ISO consulting space, it is typically get in, build a system, and then get out as quick as you can. I just didn't resonate with that style. I thought it was ripe for a little bit of a change, and we do perform ISO as a managed service for all of our partners. Look, there are a lot of people that I say we're not the right partner for you. I'll be honest with you. I do get a lot of calls across the MSP industry across a week. I might have 3 or 4 or 5 different phone calls. Just general inquiry. Hey, I've got a client. I need you to do their ISO. I need it to be done as quickly as possible. And we just say, look, we are having the wrong conversation here.
Yeah.
Right? The MSP themselves are not certified. They're trying to just clip the ticket on the way through for their client. They are trying to do the right thing. Don't get me wrong. They're trying to offer that service, but this is a very different ball game. So, we tried to make it a little bit more palatable and a bit more simple to be able to offer these kind of services rather than what it's traditionally been in the past, which are these massive annual bills that come, and then you really hits your cash flow if you don't budget accordingly and things like that.
Yeah, it makes it way more digestible, I think, to do it on a monthly basis. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of people are now starting to think about, FY27. We're getting 3 months out really from the end of financial year. So think about that budgeting and planning piece. And I think you touch on a really interesting point that a lot of people have traditionally looked at compliance as almost a tick and flick, almost it's a ticket to play. I've got an RFQ that's come in that I've won that says I have to have it. I've said yes, I've got it in the tick box, and all of a sudden this mad rush. But what I'm hearing is the opportunity, because there is so much involved, is use it as a catalyst to then, how do I improve my processes? There's a particular bar that's then set from having those standards in place. And it's an opportunity to then, how do you then use that as a continual business improvement process? Is that how you're seeing customers think about ISO as a continual business improvement process?
Yeah, so I would love to say that everybody that comes my way is a continuous improvement, process kind of client where they are doing it either proactively or they're doing it for what I would call the right reasons. The fact is that not everybody coming through the ranks is in that boat, right? So yes, you do get the ones that have done what you were saying earlier, which is we're trying to get into some work or we've won a piece of work. Now we need to do this thing. So they're committed because, financially there's an outcome they need to achieve there. What we always prefer to do though is the latter. So we want to be working with MSPs that are on that continuous improvement journey. They're doing it because they genuinely want to start understanding how to assess and treat risk within their business, because that's what it's mainly about. And those are the ones that we see where their processes generally change quite dramatically. We try not to disrupt the business where necessary, because a lot of people think that by implementing ISO, I'm going to have to throw everything out and I'm going to have to start again. And, this could completely disrupt my staff. They could get upset with me. We're going to take admin privileges away. When you start to get into the technical controls, it can be, quite controversial for some. But those that are committed to that continuous improvement piece, they almost find it a little bit of a breath of fresh air that someone's coming in and saying, hey, this is what your environment needs to look like in order for us to be compliant. And they go, okay, I can take a breath now. I can sleep a little bit easier at night knowing that, we've got some structure now around our process and our risk management to be able to, keep this business alive.
Yeah. How does ISO compare to, we hear a lot of talk about standards and things like that, SMB 1001 and NIST and essential aid and all of that. How does this, my understanding is that this is like a far superior sort of standard and I guess compliance because there's a lot more obviously involved. Is that the case? Like where does it sit?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and I get asked it a lot actually. So I try to give this analogy. Think about ISO 27001 as the umbrella that sits over whatever you decide to put underneath that umbrella. So whether you want to adopt the CIS control framework or the NIST framework, or you're beginning with SMB 1001 as a framework, they are, you can call them stepping stones if you will, but ultimately ISO 27001 can be implemented on its own to control information, but fundamentally underneath there needs to be some technical controls. And so that can come from your SMB 1001s or your NIST or your even Essential 8, your maturity levels there, they all play into what 27001 is ultimately asking for, because the fundamental difference between the ISO framework and those other ones is that it's not a prescriptive control framework. It's not going to tell you that you need to go and turn off this macro in this app, or you need to have I don't know, let's say a password manager that's configured XYZ. It does require a level of compliance from the technical control aspect, which is why those other standards really make the process a bit easier, because you've tackled you've tackled a quarter of the annex. I'm getting a little bit technical here, but at the back half of the ISO 27001, you got these 4 domains, right? You've got organizational control, you've got people control, you've got your physical building control, and then you've got your technological controls. Yeah. And that's the piece that your NIST and your CIS and your Essential 8s and your SMB 1001s fit in. But the remainder of the standard is around organizational control, and your people as well. How we're hiring, reference checking, police checking, all that kind of stuff.
Sounds like it's like almost like a feeder into it, like those SMB 1001, NIST, all that is like a feeder into your ISO, and it controls one portion of it. But there's so many other controls involved with ISO that it doesn't take care of.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you have the added ability to bolt on your 9001 qualities or your environmental. If you've got some clients that you're doing in sustainability or wind farms, and they would appreciate or see value in you as an MSP having that, and some of our partners have, you can just go ahead and you can actually bolt that on, put some environmental controls around your business, and then all of a sudden you're now playing in a space that you otherwise weren't. Or you're providing value back to your partners or your clients to show them that you're committed to their industry and what they're doing.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, because I think what people often forget is that ISO is an international standard. And I think that word standard is actually really important, because often as business owners, we're trying to understand, what does good really look like? And by having a standard, it allows you to then have those controls. But being a standard, it doesn't tell you how to do it. So you've got that flexibility. So, if you want to choose a particular tool to do that solution, you're free to actually do that. Or you choose not to have a tool and you have a manual process in place, that's still okay as long as there's something in place. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. The beauty of the ISO frameworks is that, it tells you what you need to be achieving, or almost a minimum level, and then how we decide to achieve that is completely up to the business's risk appetite. So let's just take something practical, right? You've got every MSP out there that's probably toying with this concept of application control. Okay, how do we do it? Do we have to go and buy a tool? And there's many out there. I won't name any, but I'm sure everyone can figure them out. But you've got a lot of tools out there that can perform application control. But there are also other ways to handle application control within an MSP by policy, right? And when I say by policy, in our space, it's a bit of a funny thing. Policy for us is written words or a register or a table of some sort. But policy, on the tech side, can be something that's configured. Yeah. So there are many ways to do, there's 93 controls within the 27001 standard. It comes down to risk and what the appetite is for the business to be able to effectively assess those controls and the risk associated, and then how to treat them.
Yeah. Let's talk about 42001.
Sure.
What is it? why do partners need to think about it? Like, what benefit is it going to give us?
Yeah.
Who needs it? Talk to us about all of that, because I'm not hearing a lot about it at the moment, and there's not
Yeah.
a lot on LinkedIn about it, but it's sort of something I've seen pop up a couple of times, and
Look,
what is it?
standards generally take some time to get adopted, and it depends on how many partners across the world are actually adopting it. So it was launched at the end of 2023, December 2023. So it's got a 42001 2023 tag on it, but it is very new. Okay, so we've seen about a 10% uptake within our client base alone. I can only hope that that's probably true for a lot of the industry out there. The numbers, we don't know what those numbers of uptake is, but where I'm at with this is that 27001 in its current form has been out since about 2013, right? So we're now 16 years into an InfoSec life cycle, and we're still talking about it, especially in Australia and especially across the MSP industry. So it's not something that's going to be quick for AI. We've seen the early adopters come in and go, well, you know what? We are going to be, the pioneers of AI and how we're going to work with our clients, and we're going to do it ethically, and we're going to make sure that we do it with all the controls in place to be able to show that we're leading this space. So we purposefully went out and got ourselves 42001 certified, because I'm a big believer that if you're going to offer these services, you got to know what you're doing. And so what better way to show you know what you're doing than to be certified yourself? But yeah, it is a growing standard. I think commercially it's going to be good for the partners that are going through that process. But I think we're a long way off still having, 27001. If we're still having that discussion in this space, then AI is not even going to be on a lot of partners' radars.
Wow. Okay. And so I guess, is it going to get harder to become AI certified as the longer it goes on? Like, will they change the standard to make it like harder for people, or as they learn things along the way?
Yeah, so with our ISO standards, because they're not prescriptive, they're just looking for the overarching control, right? So it's not necessarily about the tooling that you're using, but it's about how you're using it and who it impacts. So 42001 is specific about impacting or making sure that we don't impact individuals, groups of individuals, and societies.
Gotcha.
Now, let's face it, a lot of MSPs, unless they're doing, some major work, they're not impacting societies, right? We're talking, certain retail outlets out there that may have been surveillancing people with cameras, with AI that no one really knew about. And so they're the types of issues we're talking about when we're talking about, affecting societies. But individuals and groups of individuals is pretty common. All it takes is for an MSP to come up with a great idea. Oh, I'm going to make a HR bot, and I'm going to feed the Fair Work Act into it, and I'm just going to let it decide when I can, make a decision on a certain person within my organization. If we're allowing those bots to make those decisions, or those agents to make those decisions without any human in the loop or any kind of governance, then we've got some issues, right? So 42001 is a way to show that, we're not just being cowboys in this space. We're actually thinking about the process of making these agents, using these agents, and then developing these agents, especially for clients.
Yeah.
So really it's a set of guardrails in place very much. So, if you're going to go and launch open claw and things like that, thinking about what are the guardrails that need to be put in place before you then do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Australia, we have the National AI Centre, and they've got some guardrails which they released. It could have been over 12 months ago, maybe even further, or they revised them. But outside of those guardrails, we haven't really got anything in Australia that is in concrete at the moment. In Europe, which generally leads this way, you've got the European Union AI Act, or the EU AI Act as we call it now. And that's got a bit of a risk matrix in it itself that says, what's allowed and what's not allowed effectively. And so we've built our 42001 system based on the European Union's, risk matrix and things like that, so that we've at least tied it to something. In Australia, if things tend to, if something changes here, we'll obviously adopt that as well.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
And
I know that there's so much to unpack. And look, the thing I just keep coming back to in my mind is, if a listener there is thinking about this, what is the catalyst for them to really wake up in the morning and pick up the phone and go, hey, I need ISO something? Like,
Mm.
what do you think is that sort of catalyst? Is it the size of the business? Is it the revenue in the business? Is it the risk appetite? Like, what is that catalyst, do you think?
I think it's something that, quite frankly, is scaring a lot of MSP owners to make a decision. I have far too many conversations where, I'll always ask flat out. I never really asked this at the beginning because I was a little bit tentative, starting a new business. But as you get a little bit of confidence, when you are building a business and now working with a lot more partners, I'll ask them, what's the reason that you're calling me? And they'll go, my biggest client is now asking me to get certified. And I'll kind of say, have you ever thought about this before? And, I get a bit disappointed when I hear, oh, yeah, we started 2 years ago, but then it all became a little bit too hard and we got busy and then we kind of just let it go and now we're here. And then now everyone's running around trying to figure out, well, how do we make sure that we keep this key client for this MSP? Because, I think of it like this: if they lose that client, it generally means that potentially jobs are lost at the other end at the MSP. And so for me, it's, I'm in this space, I see it every day, but I just think, how are we not thinking about this now when we only think about it when a fire is lit under our feet and we go, oh, okay, we either can't get into this business because we need to be certified, or our existing clients asking us now, hey, need you to be able to show us that you can handle risk within your business. And everyone goes, oh, we're on our journey. And don't even ask me about that statement.
The other thing that I hear from a lot of MSPs that we work with is around cyber insurance as well. And, that's continuing to go up every sort of year. The renewal comes around. Are you also seeing that 27001 helps with that process to demonstrate that there is a certain level of governance and control?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's timely that you asked that question. I'm literally going through my renewal as it is, and us being certified ourselves independently means that, when we do go through those questionnaires, we can just rattle off the answers so easily. We're not sitting there trying to figure out how to dupe the insurance company into maybe thinking that we're doing the right thing. It's, hey, we're certified, here are our certificates, and here's a decent answer to how we do certain things like MFA or backing up and things like that. So I consider it as a tool within the business to be able to answer these things like insurance and security questionnaires and all of these things that everyone complains about. Usually, oh, we've got another security questionnaire. Now what do we do? Well, if you've got a answer bank based on your ISMS that you can just hand to someone and say, hey, when we get our next security questionnaire, here's all the answers that you need to provide, then that's a lot more efficient than any other way. All right. I wish we lived in a world where all procurement teams were asking for the same thing, but it's just not the case. Every security questionnaire comes in a different format based on a different framework.
Yeah. So we've been hearing a lot of buzz in the market about Cert Index. So
Yes.
Is this your partner program, or what is Cert Index?
So Cert Index is a new initiative started by us. We launched it in October of 2025, and it is a way for ISO certified IT providers across Australia and New Zealand to register and upload their ISO certificates and be independently verified by us to be able to show that those certificates are valid and be able to create a profile for their MSP to be able to then showcase who they are, what they do, and what vendors that they're competent in supporting, what industries they're competent in supporting. So it's almost a marketplace, if you will,
like a directory.
Where procurement teams can go to Cert Index and they just might type in one word. It could just be law, or it could be a partner, a vendor name, and only those partners competent in those areas will show up. And so we've got just under 100 listed there at the moment. I know there's more ISO certified companies out there, but we are now starting to see a bit of traction in it.
And is it mostly for tech providers?
Yeah, it's mainly for the tech industry.
Okay.
There is no way for any procurement team right now to verify someone's claims of being ISO certified. So we've decided that via the tendering process, anyone that is a part of Cert Index, they're going to be able to download a cool one pager that says they've been independently verified by Cert Index, and that they can get their unique link. And the procurement team on the other end can actually go and verify, the work that we've actually seen and verified for them. So it's just a bit of transparency. There's a bit of smoke and mirrors that goes on in the MSP space and has been for a really long time. And so this is just a way to be able to elevate and differentiate, as we were talking about before, Pete. The providers that are really doing the right thing and are effectively not trying to say, we're on our journey, or, and there's no way to verify that.
Yeah.
It's about actually creating that separation, which is, what it's there for.
Yeah, genuine.
Yeah. And so does an organisation need to be an ISO 365 customer to register on Cert Index?
No, it's free registration if you're legitimately certified, and we can refer to JASANCE, which is the Joint Accreditation System of Australia and New Zealand. That's why they call it JASANCE. That if we can verify it via there, then we can pop it on Cert Index, no problems.
And how do people where do they go? Was that a website?
Yeah,
or?
it's a website. It's just certindex.io. You'll see a list of all the ISO certified MSPs across Australia and New Zealand. And it's not just information security as well. That is the base. That is the prerequisite to get on there. But you'll see the MSPs that are quality certified or environmentally certified. Because like I was saying before, if I'm a sustainability, if I'm a client in sustainable energy and I want a specific MSP that is 14,001 certified, I can then use the filters to go from 100 partners down to, let's say, 14 or 15, and then I can start filtering by state or even team size. Maybe they don't want to work with someone that's 10 to 20 staff, let's say, but maybe they're looking for a company that's got 300 plus. Who knows?
Yeah.
So that's the tool.
Yeah, what a great idea to really give end customers the assurance that they're working with someone that's, reputable in inverted commas there. Because I think, unfortunately, our industry in IT is often full of cowboys. And I think this is one way for, an end user then to be able to then look at 3 different MSPs and really understand who's going to be the safe pair of hands for them.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Jason, thank you so much for joining us today. I have found this conversation so incredibly valuable. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
So pretty active on LinkedIn as most people are these days. So just look for me on LinkedIn, or you can email me directly. It's just jason@iso365.com.au.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Pete, thank you so much for joining me on the other side of the table.
Yeah, thank you, Kayla, and thank you, Jason. But before we finish up, is it ISO? ISO? How do you actually pronounce?
It is ISO. So it stands for the in Europe, the International Organization for Standardization, which in fact is the reverse acronym. It's iOS, but we don't call it that. Here it's ISO. So I have my ex-manager at First Focus, Neil, to thank for calling it ISO. It kind of just rolls off the tongue a little bit better, but he might appreciate that shout out. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks for educating us on ISO and everything around it.
Thanks for having me, guys.